how can you bring a bunch of people that all have a different understanding of what a team should look like, a different psychology and way of working, and especially different standards for how they process and transport information to another? How can you bring all of those people together and get them to align and agree on one way forward? And that skill is what I call the operator's superpower. And in this video, I'm actually going to show you exactly how to do it yourself and teach you my conventions that have successfully done and executed this skill in any type of organization that you can think of. From creator businesses to hardware, software, deep tech companies, to community-based events and filmmaking businesses. So my point is, this skill is universal and goes across any type of business that you can think of. So let's get into it. So the thing I'm going to teach you is actually how to create a diagram like this one. As you see, this is defining how people interact in a specific process across different stakeholders and different phases. I have run similar processes like this again and again in many types of organizations, from editing workflows to complicated testing workflows to AI workflows. And this skill is so valuable because it teaches you how you can get a piece of information and go through many different phases, interact with many different stakeholders, and while you are doing that, transform that information through many decision points and many action points to the type of information that is actually valuable for you. And this is extremely important in the AI age because this skill is what people are longing for. This is the architect role. And if you understand this, you can go in any business, you can do what I call an ops teardown or an audit, and you can figure out where their workflows are stuck or where the people are not making the correct decisions and therefore losing a lot of leverage, time, or money in the process. So to be able to create a chart like this, we need to first understand a few conventions, and that's what I want to actually show you. The first convention is that every single action that we take, every single incremental action that we have to take on that piece of information needs to be defined within a square box. This means our actions that are in these boxes can only have one input and one output. If we want a decision point, meaning we have more than one input and more than one output, then what we have is an ellipse, something like this. Decision elements can have more than one input, but they only can always have one or two outputs. This is important because if you have a decision point that has more than two outputs, that decision is too complicated to take or show on our graph, which means you might have to break it down to further decisions. And this binary nature of this element allows us to get extremely clear on what decisions are. Next, we have circles, which indicate where the workflow starts and where the workflow ends. And last but not least, the fourth convention that we need to align on is solid lines versus dotted lines. A solid line shows that there is actually information or data flowing from one point to another. A dotted line means that there's some sort of a correlation, but not per se a direct information flow from that node to another. Now, the thing is, if you put all of these different nodes together, you can quickly see how you can create a nice flowchart. In fact, this is quite conventional in software development for defining specific algorithms of how a software runs before actually writing all the code. Oh, and by the way, you can always add labels to your arrows for understanding. So you can say extra info showing up next to a specific arrow, or as you can see here, you can have a yes/no decision point. Let's randomly just draw one so that you can see all of this coming together. We have a starting point and we have an end point. From the start, we take an action. From our action, we might take another action. From that action, we might go to a decision point. And remember, a decision always has to have one or two things coming out of it. So in case of a yes, we might go that way. And in case of a no, we might come back to this action. And again, here you might have another action that finally leads to the end state. And lastly, for the sake of the argument, that action that you take might create a secondary artifact. So we just have a dotted line into maybe another action point that just saves that information, for example. And we can always label this as save info for example. Now, why am I showing you this? Because this is a very, very simple workflow chart. And as you saw earlier with my example, it can get a lot more complicated. And the reason for that is that you need to understand the basic elements of how this workflow chart works, and of course, follow our conventions. And if you do so, you will end up in a state where you can follow the chart very easily from start to end. And one tip for you is that always think about the person's eyes. Think about what they need to read so that they can move their eyes into the next step or the next node on the chart. So for example, let's look at very quickly what happens to the user when they're going to look at this chart. They will start at the start, they will go down, see that action, they'll see this arrow is this way, so they have to go that way. They see that action, they go down, decision point no, they come up, so that's one route. Decision point yes, they go there. Here, they now have two ways to look at it. You see, it's a dotted line, so it's okay to have that, but dotted lines have, in general, less effect than main lines. So they will first go up here, and then what happens, they probably come back here and look at this line as well. Why am I showing you this? Because it shows how the eye can follow the path. And when your diagrams get very complex, like the one I'm showing you here, it is very crucial that you follow these rules so that people and the stakeholders that you have in the room can start following what you have to say. And now we're getting to the fun part, because after you have the flowchart and you have made the information people had in their own heads or in systems and software into an understandable thing you can look and point at, then people will start talking about this rather than their feelings, their emotions, or what that software or thing means about them. And this is so cool because then you can actually move forward on solving the problem. The thing is, you as the operator might not always have the correct understanding of a specific flow, but if you get the right experts, in a creator business, you get the editor and the creative director and the filmmaker in the room, and you can talk about the workflow, you get closer and closer to what the outcome is. For example, here's a complicated editing workflow that we had for producing 80 hours worth of content. This was a very, very long 2 or 3 year project with 12 people working on it at some point. But if we didn't figure out this workflow, we didn't know where things would get stuck or where things are moving forward. Or here's another example. This is a very complicated safety critical flight testing campaign where you can see there's so many different people and so many phases involved. And we need to now all align on how to take the most safe and most logical steps after each other. So that's why I had to create something like this and align people together. And my point is, I did not know everything, but when I got the engineer and other people in the room, they could help me and identify if, for example, one of my decision points is wrong. Or maybe they define, hey, this loop that you have here is actually completely wrong. And instead, this decision point has to go to another action. And that means that people will get into a problem-solving mode, and this is the most productive I've ever seen teams be because I facilitate, I own the chart, I ask questions, and they give me knowledge, we solve problems and move forward. This is extremely, extremely valuable. So now that you understand how to create a flowchart like this and you understand the conventions, I want to show you the next thing, which is taking this to the next level. And when you get your flowcharts on steroids, it means you can really map out very, very complex workflows. Workflows that cannot exist just as a flowchart like this. It needs to also define who is interacting with every single element and also in what phases or in what levels or stages. To do that, I actually came up with a new idea myself, which is to overlay my flowcharts on top of a color-coded table. And first, I'm going to show you how that table works, and then I'm going to teach you how you can overlay this flowchart over your table, which makes it super powered. Okay, so the table is actually quite simple to make. It is simply a 2D table with a y-axis and an x-axis. On the y-axis, you will have the roles, and on the x-axis, you will have the phases. For the sake of simplicity, I'm going to have a 4-phased project here. So we have phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and phase 4. Ignore my beautiful handwriting. And I'm gonna also have 4 roles. So I'm gonna have role 1, role 2, role 3, and role 4. What this allows me to do is that it looks at a specific role and a specific phase, so for example, this cell, and checks whether that decision, action, start, endpoint, or whatever else I need interfaces within that role in that phase. And if not, then I move to the next one, and the next one, and the next one, until I have a match. That's my whole algorithm for creating super complex workflows that is actually giving people clarity. So let's actually do this. Let's, again, do a test workflow here, all of it abstracted, just to see how this works. So again, our convention is to start. Let's just say we start here, just for the sake of simplicity. Now that we start, we'll see, okay, the next action I need to take is action, let's say X. I will see, is action X for R2 in phase 1? Let's assume the answer is no. Is it for R3? Yes, it is. So that means we put the action here. And that means obviously start to the action, there needs to be a line like that. Next, let's again assume we have to take another action, but this is just my phase 1 already done. All of this is obviously assumptions I'm making. It depends on the workflow you're creating, but I'm simplifying it for you to understand the principle behind of it. And then we can apply to super complex workflows, which I'll cover in a second. So start action 1, and then we go to, let's say, action 2. Again, can be the same person. And now maybe out of action 2, we have a decision point, which means we have to maybe decide with person 2 here, role 2 at phase 2. So then we can have a decision point. I'm just going to simplify it and just write D1 as decision 1. And then we have obviously this going in here. And again, a decision can only have 1 or 2 outputs, a yes, no binary decision point. So let's say in the yes version, we move forward. And in the no version, we maybe go back to this action. So this is no, and this is yes. So then now that we move forward, we might have another action here for this person. Or actually, let's maybe make it a bit more complicated, because I want you to see how this would, for example, work. And let's say this is an approval process. So you have action 1, action 2 taken. Now role 2, maybe it's a test engineer that needs to test and approve something. If they do approve it, then the action goes to maybe person 4. So we have a new action here. And then obviously from that point, you have to go there. So you have a line like so. And if now person 4 takes that action and it's all good, maybe we can go to the end state, which goes back to person 1 who requested something. So we go to an end state here, and I look like Wolverine here with all these things in my head. And then we have action 3, which then goes all the way up here. And let's say it's the end of the flow. But you can see how this works, right? So let's maybe see what sort of a workflow can this be. Person 1 requests something, person 3 takes the action, takes another action, and then adds it to person 2, maybe a tester, or maybe someone that has to approve something. If they decide, yes, it's approved, it goes to person 4, they take an action and we're done, they got what they wanted. And if not, they have to go back and take that action again until this loop is done. So again, if you remember from the earlier example, let's quickly follow along with our eyes here. So we go down, here you go right, here you go up. Now you have the 2 points, either you go right or you go left. Usually people read left to right. So they're probably gonna go right first, then their eye comes back, looks at this path. They have done this already, they understand it's a loop. So then they follow, they get to action 3, and then they see the only way out is the end. And this is how you create flowcharts for explaining specific processes. Now, you can always make this more complicated. For example, if action 3 here is taken, we might want to have a specific dotted line to here as, for example, I don't know, learnings, which means this is not a direct action, but it is basically some sort of information from that action that is brought back to person 3 and action 1 so that they can make a more informed action going forward. All right, so that's basically how I would define a workflow like this, and how the conventions lead to the flowchart, and how the flowchart can be overlaid this 2D table that gives us clarity not only on how the flow works, but who is involved and in what phase they're involved in. The next and final thing that you can do is to just add a bit more polish on top of everything, is to color code stuff. Obviously, it's a bit difficult to do it with these, but I could also color code actions that, for example, have a human involved in them with a different color. And this is usually what I do in my flowcharts. That means here there's a human involved, here there isn't. And this is really valuable when later you will have AI specific workflows where an agent is going to take an action instead of a human taking an action. And maybe a decision point is always a human because that's the judgment call, or maybe the AI can make the judgment call itself. So I hope you understand how important it is if you have the skill to build workflow charts like this, because this is one of the most important skills going forward in an AI age. There are companies that will literally kill for you to be able to create something like this for them. That is exactly what I'm currently doing at a robotics company here in Munich, helping them figure out their specific workflows and then helping them choose the right softwares, the right people in the different action points, and helping them figure out exactly where they're missing a lot of time and money in their workflow chart, which leads to the company making more money, being more efficient, and ultimately reaching their goals, getting to the vision that they set as the company and aligning the different elements that we saw earlier from the anatomy, psychology, and the physiology. And speaking of AI, let me get rid of my pens for a second, because I really need to share this with you. I have managed to actually automate a lot of the things that you just saw for creating workflow charts like that using Claude Code. What does that mean? That means you can have a call transcript. You can have a random meeting and take that call transcript, add it to this skill, which is called mirror style flowcharts, and then it will generate a flowchart like this for you. In fact, following the exact conventions that I just taught you, following the exact table and workflow chart overlay setup that I explained. And it has absolutely blown my mind how good it is. Because now, especially with new models such as Fable 5, you can have it verify its own work. And I've created something like this and something like this that took my AI agent 36 minutes of continuous working to fix and figure out, but the final result has absolutely blown me away. So if you enjoyed this style of video, please let me know, because I really enjoy making them. And I have so much more different workflows and stuff and details that I can get into. Please leave a comment down below and let me know if this helps, because I truly believe this is one of the most important skills to learn in the 21st century, and especially in the AI era. Because every single company out there that wants to implement AI is going to get to a point where they realize that their people and their workflows and the information flow in that company not all agree with each other. And therefore, they need people like us, whether you want to call us operators, consultants, or whatever, to come in and figure this out for them. And this skill, creating flowcharts that don't suck, really, really matter. And yes, the skill file will be linked down below, so you can just download it for free and enjoy. Peace.